Welcome to the Department of Human Services Licensing Administration's presentation on the completion of the application for a Certificate of Compliance for a Human Services license. This tutorial will focus on the purpose of the application, identify the program offices and types of service that use the application, identify the purpose of each field on the application, identify the documents required to support the application, identify how to submit the application and supporting documentation, and identify contacts to address additional questions or concerns. This page details the program offices that do not use the Form HS 633 to apply for a Certificate of Compliance to become a licensed provider. One of those offices is the Office of Developmental Programs. The types of service that they provide are at the bottom of that list. If you are applying for any of those types of service, then please use that information to search the website for information on becoming a licensed provider with the Office of Developmental Programs. The other office that does not use this form is the Office of Child Development and Early Learning, known as OCDEL. Again, those types of service that they license are at the bottom of this page. If you are going to apply for one of those types of licenses, again, you can use those links to find out more information on how to apply for one of those types of service. Both of these program offices use an electronic application, and therefore this paper HS 633 is not the form needed for these types of service. This presentation will be for the following offices and types of service. The first office to discuss is the Office of Children, Youth, and Families, also known as OCYF. This program office does use the HS 633 for a Certificate of Compliance application, and the programs they license are listed here. If you are applying for one of these types of service, then you would use the HS 633 to complete the application for your Certificate of Compliance. The Office of Mental Health and Substance Abuse Services, known as OMSAS, also uses this HS 633 for their application to become a licensed provider with one of these types of service. Again, if this is a type of service you are applying for, then you would use the HS 633 form for a Certificate of Compliance. The Office of Long-Term Living, the Bureau of Human Services Licensing, or BHSL, again uses the HS 633 form to apply for a Certificate of Compliance to become a licensed provider for assisted living residents, and the definition of an assisted living residence is listed here. Assisted living residence, or ALR, is licensed under the Chapter 2800 regulations. The Office of Long-Term Living, Bureau of Human Services Licensing, BHSL, also uses the HS 633 form to apply for a certificate of compliance to become a licensed provider for personal care homes, or PCH. The definition of a personal care home is listed here, and it is also found in the Chapter 2600 regulations pertaining to personal care homes. The HS 633 is used for different reasons. One reason is for a new facility or agency. And this can be a brand new facility, a new agency. It might be a change in an agency or facility's physical address. That would be another reason you could use it. Also, if there are changes that include but are not limited to a sale to another organization, or a change in the organization or management, a change in the legal entity name that will result in a new Federal Employee Identification Number, or the FEIN. These would be all reasons that you would use this HS 633 as a new facility or agency. In these cases, the certificate number field will remain blank, as it will be assigned when it is issued. Another reason to use this form is for renewal. If the pre-populated renewal form is not available to you, then you would use this form. And finally, for a revision. And if you are changing your legal entity FEIN, it becomes a new facility or agency. The rest of this tutorial will focus on the new facility or agency as the reason for completing this HS 633 application for a certificate of compliance. As stated, we will be discussing new applications, and the form is the application for certificate of compliance, also known as the HS 633. This is what the form looks like. We will be detailing each field in the next few slides. For the purpose of this application, you will make a check in the box indicating that it is a new facility or agency. Again, the certificate number will be blank, as it will be assigned when it is going to be issued. In number 1, you indicate the name of your facility or agency, the physical address of the location, email address, and telephone number. Number 1 is all about the agency or facility information. Number 2 indicates the information for the legal entity. So you indicate the name, you complete the name of the legal entity. For example, this would be the person who owns it as an individual. It could be a partnership, association, corporation, an organization, an LLC, or governmental body, but it's the person responsible or the entity responsible for the operation of the facility or agency, their mailing address, an email address, and the telephone number. All of this information is about the legal entity. Now, the name of the legal entity may be the same as the name of the agency or facility in number 1, but it could be different. So number 2 is all about the legal entity. If it is an LLC, then you would put the name of the LLC. If it is a sole proprietor and you have an LLC, it would still be the name of the LLC, not the person that owns the LLC. In number 3, you will list the county in which the facility or agency is located, and also indicate the municipality, town, city, township, or borough in which the facility or agency is located. Number 4, indicate the name, the full name and title of the person who's responsible for the daily operation of the facility or agency, the person that the legal entity wants as their representative. Number 5 is the type of service, and this should be specific to those types of services that we indicated in the first few screens. The specific types of service are also found on the application instructions. Number 6 is the requested license capacity. So this field applies to types of service in which there will be residents living and or types of service where the services will be provided at the address in number 1 that will indicate a number of people that you would see at one time. For the Bureau of Human Services licensing types of service, they can offer specialty care. So all specific specialty care, if offered, is required to be listed in this field. More information on that can be found in number 5 of the application instructions for more information there. Again, this is the requested number. It may not be the number that the department will actually find that you can have, but it's the number you are requesting. Number 7 is for the Federal Employee Identification Number, or if you are an individual applying, then your Social Security number. It is the number that you will be filing your taxes or payroll under. That number should be listed here. And if you do list your Social Security number, keep in mind that it is voluntary, and we do request it just for tax purposes and identification. Number 8 is for the type of operation. So if you are nonprofit, then we request verification, which can be either something stating you're a nonprofit from the Internal Revenue Service or the IRS, or we also will accept something from the Pennsylvania Department of Revenue. If we do not have that verification, then the operation will be considered for profit. A copy of the filing with the Pennsylvania Department of State as a nonprofit entity is not accepted as verification for this section. The Department of State does not require verification, and therefore if you submit something as a nonprofit, they may consider you a nonprofit. However, we need further verification of that, again, from either the Internal Revenue Service, IRS, or the Pennsylvania Department of Revenue. Number 9 discusses or wants to know the type of ownership control. So you would indicate your type of ownership, that is the legal entity that is listed in number 1 on the application. And supporting documents should be submitted to verify the type of ownership or control you check in this field. For a form business authorization, if a entity like an LLC or an LP or any other entity that was formed in a different state than Pennsylvania, that entity is considered a foreign business, and therefore you have to file a form with the Pennsylvania Department of Revenue to give you authorization to do business in Pennsylvania. For a fictitious name approval, some call this fictitious name approval a doing business as name, or a DBA. In Pennsylvania, if you are a for-profit entity and you want to name your facility or agency something other than the legal entity name, then you are required to file that as a fictitious name and seek approval from the Pennsylvania Department of State for that. So if the information in number 2, the legal entity, if that name does not match exactly as the name in number 1 for the facility or agency, and you are for profit, you will need to receive a fictitious name approval from the Pennsylvania Department of State prior to submitting your application here for a certificate of compliance. Number 10, if you answer yes to this question, you will have to use a separate sheet to provide an explanation for the affirmative answer. So it wants to know about your prior license status. Has your agency or facility or legal entity or the person responsible in item 4 or any person signing the application ever been denied a certificate or license, had a certificate of compliance or license revoked, or had a certificate of compliance or license non-renewed in Pennsylvania or any other state. Number 11 has two parts. The first part is, has the legal entity, owner, or operator ever been convicted of a felony or misdemeanor? Again, if you answer yes, then a separate page should be completed to provide an explanation for that affirmative answer. Second part, Part B, has the legal entity, owner, or operator ever been named a perpetrator in an indicated or founded report of abuse in accordance with the Child Protective Services Law, which is listed there, the Adult Protective Services Act, or the Older Adult Protective Services Act? If yes to any of those, then again, a sheet of paper with the explanation is required. And number 12, is the legal entity, owner, or operator currently charged with a felony or misdemeanor? And again, a yes would indicate a need to provide an explanation for that affirmative answer. The last part of the application is the declaration. It must be signed by the legal entity. If the legal entity is a partnership, association, or organization, the person authorized to sign such documents must sign it. And where the legal entity is a corporation or LLC, the signature must be a corporate officer or board member. You type or print the name and title of the person signing and then sign it. Electronic signatures are accepted. So that completes the application portion for the Certificate of Compliance, the HS 633, and how to complete it. Now we're going to talk about the supporting documents that are needed to be entered with the application. We've covered corporate papers and the foreign business registration if needed, and we've covered fictitious name approval, again, if that is needed. We've also covered nonprofit verification if needed. So we will talk about a certificate of occupancy, and we will talk about the Civil Rights Compliance Form, also known as the HS 2126, and if there are any application fees involved. We will begin by talking about the certificates of occupancy or occupancy permits. For residential occupancies, these are the types of occupancies we will accept. And this is a building code occupancy. It is not a zoning occupancy. So we want to know what the building code inspector identified the dwelling to be built under the International Building Code, what year they inspected it to be under. And then this also will tell us what the use for that dwelling is. And sometimes it will also indicate how many residents can stay in that building or live in that building. And this may vary depending on the regulations under which you want to be licensed, as well as the, say, square feet in that regulation per room for a bedroom. So although you might want to be licensed for 10 residents, if when the licensing representatives come out to do an inspection, if they deem that you can only have 7, you will be licensed for 7, even though your certificate of occupancy, according to the building code inspector, might say, yes, you can have 10 residents. So we work with the building code inspectors to determine the type of license that, or I'm sorry, the type of certificate of occupancy you need for your location. For care facilities that are congregate living facilities and non-transient, but more than 16 occupants, we may accept an R2. For care facilities with 5 or less occupants, it would be acceptable to have an R3. For custodial care of 5 to 16 persons, then we would accept an R4. For 24-hour custodial care for more than 16 residents, we would look for an I1 and a condition 1 if they are capable of self-preservation, or a condition 2 if they have limited verbal or physical assistance required if they are responding to emergency evacuation. We would require an I2 for 24-hour custodial care of more than 5 residents incapable of self-preservation. And an I3 would be for more than 5 persons in a secure setting or a detention type setting. Now, these are codes that we use to go by depending on what the type of service is being requested. Again, we may reach out to your local building code inspector to discuss with them what you are seeking to be licensed to provide, and then whether or not this type of use code would be acceptable. Another note is that many municipalities and cities will also require zoning, which at the moment we do not license based on zoning. However, we do work with the local authorities to, if they have a problem with your zoning, then we might discuss that with your local zoning code officer. But our primary concern is how is the building built and what type of fire safety is included in that building. So for residential facilities, those are what we look for. Now, if your certificate of occupancy is not issued or needed according to a municipality, then we require a letter or an email from that local authority stating that it is not required. So it has to specifically state that information, that your type of service for that location does not require a certificate of occupancy or an occupancy permit. If it is a non-residential occupancy, some of the occupancy use we use or accept is B for business, such as if it's an office setting, or E for education, such as a day treatment, or if the services will be provided in a school. We require those non-residential occupancies. If your office is going to be in a residential home, we still require the certificate of occupancy, occupancy permit, or again, that letter from the municipality or local authority stating whether or not one is needed. The next supporting documentation we require to come with the application is a civil rights compliance form. So this is required from the Bureau of Equal Opportunity, and they requested us to accept it with the application, and then we will send that as an email to the Bureau of Equal Opportunity to be reviewed and approved. Then, if the Bureau of Equal Opportunity has any questions for you, they would contact you and let you know what they need. So the Civil Rights Compliance Form is Form HS 2126 for a new provider or a new location, and that form also requires supporting documents. This is the web address to find it on the internet. You can go there, click on this form, download it, and complete it, and then attach it with your application to send to licensing administration. Now, for technical assistance with your civil rights compliance, you have to contact a civil rights compliance specialist. Licensing administration is not the person to contact or the office to contact. So the information to contact them, the Bureau of Equal Opportunity, is listed here as their email address or the telephone number. If you do call the telephone number, you would then, once you are connected, select the number 2 and then select the number 6 to speak with a civil rights compliance specialist. In addition to the documents required to be submitted with the application, as we noted previously, BHSL also requires an affiliation statement from the legal entity. This would be for personal care homes and assisted living residences. So they require a statement from the home's legal entity listing all licensed human service facilities with which anyone with ownership and control interest in the facility and/or legal entity has been affiliated with within the past 3 years, including but not limited to parent companies, subsidiaries, partnerships, management agreements, etc. Also, there are some types of service that require application fees. Again, that is for BHSL only. So the application fees are required to be submitted with the application packet to operate a personal care home that can be found in Chapter 20 of the PA Code, Title 55. And the amount of the application fee is based on the number of beds. So if you want to license 4 to 20 beds, then the application fee is $15. 21 to 50 is $20, 51 to 100 beds is $30, and 101 beds and over is $50. This is an application fee. It is not a per bed fee. Also to note is that personal care homes are only licensed with 4 or more residents. If there are going to be 1 to 3 residents in the personal care home, then it will not be licensed and you will not receive a certificate of compliance, so the application will not have to be submitted. It's only for 4 or more personal care beds to be licensed. The application fees for an assisted living residence are published in the Chapter 2800 regulations. Those application fees are $300 for an application for an assisted living residence. And if you want to have an assisted living residence with a special care unit, then that would be an additional $150. So the total application fee for an assisted living with a special care unit as $450. If it's only assisted living, it would be $300. These are both application fees. So assisted living residents have the application fees, as I just discussed, and they also have another part to their fees, and that is a per bed fee. So for an assisted living residence, after you submit your application and application fee, once everything is complete and the license or certificate of compliance is recommended to be issued, at that point we will send a letter of request for the per bed fee. The per bed fee is $35 per bed, and that will be assessed and requested at a later date, so not at the submission of the application. So do not pay that until you are requested to make that payment. On this page, there are some links that are helpful. We have the link for the DHS licensing page. And on that page, you will find the initial application checklist for a certificate of compliance for human service settings, and that application will have a lot of the information that was discussed in this slide presentation. We also have the link for the Civil Rights Compliance Form, the HS 2126 for new providers. And then if you want more information on any of these types of service for the different program offices, those links are there as well. If applying for a, a license or certificate of compliance with the Office of Children, Youth, and Families, your application and supporting documentation can be emailed to this email address. For the Office of Mental Health and Substance Abuse Services, the application and supporting documentation should be emailed to this second email address. The application fee, and civil rights compliance form have to be sent as hard copy via either a courier such as UPS or FedEx, or via the United States Postal Service. But it must be sent for a personal care home or assisted living residence to the Bureau of Human Services licensing. Those addresses are listed here. Your check or money order should be made payable to either DHS or Commonwealth of PA. And that has to come hard copy because of the application fees involved. So it's the application fees for either the personal care home or application fees for an assisted living residence. But these are the mailing addresses for the Bureau of Human Services licensing. Because the other two program offices do not have application fees, that is why they can be submitted electronically via email. Should you have any questions for the Bureau of Human Services licensing, they can be submitted to this email account. We also list the telephone number. Should you have any questions, you can call the telephone number, and then depending on what the question is for which program office you would be applying, then you would select one of the 5 numbers listed there. That concludes the tutorial for the HS 633 application for a certificate of compliance. I'd like to thank you for taking the time to view this tutorial. We do work under the governor's timeline for new applications, and so hopefully by understanding the requirements of the application and submitting all of the documents discussed, we can move your application along quickly. Again, if you have any questions or need to contact us, that last page does list the contact information.